Okay, I'm going to show you some more basics of processing. So let's go ahead and open that up. Today we're going to look at um, the background. This will be a quick one. Okay, as you've seen in previous tutorials, we're just going to set up our sketch as we normally do. And I'm going to make it a size. And add my draw. Okay, and let's talk today about background, which normally goes in draw. So background is a function that basically gives you a background on your canvas. So right now I have a canvas 500 by 500. Let's comment this out. If I run that, it sort of gives me the default background color, which is a gray. Now, if I want to set that background to a different color, I use the background function, and it takes as an argument a color. So black and white, you can give it 1. It's an well, there's a number of different standards you can use, but typically you use RGB, or I do anyways. And so you can give it a 0 if you want your background to be black. If you give the argument 255, the background will be white. Or you can do an RGB thing. If you want red, it will be red. Okay. Let's change it. And so what happens with background, remember draw draws, runs, it loops. And so it runs everything that's in draw, it runs 1 time per frame, which is pretty quick usually. In my computer, it's about 60 frames a second or 60 times a second. So basically, it's going to redraw this background every frame, 60 frames a second, 60 times a second. It's redrawing, basically painting over my entire canvas, my entire sketch with this color. And that's what background does essentially. But how is it used? So oftentimes you want to put a background. You can draw a shape in front of it, for example. If I draw a rectangle on top of my sketch, there you have a rectangle there. A nice little square. Okay. Well, what happens if I draw the background after I draw my rectangle? In that case, there is no rectangle because it wouldn't. In fact, remember, draw does this in order every time once per frame. So it's establishing these things, and it's drawing the rectangle, and then it's drawing the background over the rectangle. So in fact, you don't ever see the rectangle because it's always drawing the background over the rectangle. And if we put it back, we get our rectangle back or our square back. Now, what about, why use background at all? What about animation? Well, if we were to sort of move our rectangle, let's see, 200, the x plus plus, do a basic animation, you'll see my square is moving to the right. Now, if I was to get rid of my background, let's see what happens when I do that. So see what happens is it's drawing the rectangle once per frame, and it's moving it over essentially 1 pixel per frame. So it's moving it slightly over, but it's not erasing the last rectangle. So the rectangle happens, and then another rectangle has on top of that, another one has that. So you just go to sort of this swath of color that moves across your screen. That's what happens when you reduce your background. Sometimes that can be used for various effects and stuff. You want to get these shadow effects and such like that. I think a technique, sometimes people use the alpha. I'm not sure alpha works on a background, does it? No, I think you have to draw a rectangle. So another way of thinking about background is drawing an entire rectangle over the entire screen. So if I do no stroke and do a fill, if I fill it with the same color here, this is essentially the same thing as background, what I'm doing right now. And then I draw a rect for the screen width, or the sketch width, and the sketch height. Sorry. If I start at 0, that's the X location, 0 for Y. That's where we start the rectangle, up in the upper left-hand corner. And we draw it to the width. That's the width of my sketch and height. My sketch. Then we'll have the exact same thing, hopefully. Yeah, we have a green background. Now, it's with these kind of things that you can do what's called an alpha. So you can actually do sort of a fade in and a fade out. So let's make that, say, 10. So basically, it's going to draw a rectangle with an alpha transparency of 10. So really like sort of faint rectangle. And then in every frame. But then it'll draw one on top of that, and then one on top of that, one on top of that. So you get sort of a shadow effect there. So that's an interesting thing you can do with background oftentimes. And obviously, as you adjust this, the lower that number is, that alpha number is, the longer the shadow will be. In fact, that's a bit too low, so it doesn't do it at all. Okay, right. And if we make it, say, 50, let's see if they get anything at all. Get a little bit of a fuzz there. All right. So basically, this is doing the same thing if you want to have these sort of shadow effects. But it's drawing a rectangle around the whole entire canvas, but at sort of a fainter color. But then as it draws another one, it draws another, it gets darker and darker and darker. But remember, you're drawing this rectangle on top of that, and then vice versa, so you get a bit of a sketch. But I sort of digress a little bit. Really what we want to spend our time on today and learn about is just this background function, which is essentially sort of like an eraser. It erases your sketch, or it repaints your sketch, just like repainting your wall. You do some graffiti on it, and then you repaint your wall again, and you do some more graffiti on top of that. But if you're doing it at such a high speed, at this draw speed, then in fact you can create something that resembles animation, that resembles movement. Okay, I think I'll end this tutorial here with simply sort of summarizing background by saying you do it in draw, and basically it draws a swath of color across your entire sketch, and then it does it again one time per frame. And the location of background is important. The line of code there is important, is what I mean to say. Usually you do it at the very top of your draw because it's the first thing you put down. It's sort of like primer. You put the background down, then you draw things on top of your background. And then the next frame, the primer comes on again, and it erases your whole everything, all that work you've done, it erases. But then, of course, it remembers the work you've done, and it draws it back again.